Good morning to all of you. You can hear me? Good. Yeah, so it's a really pleasant experience to be here. In fact, some time back I was just mentioning, I thought I had only one former boss in this room, but later I realized I have another boss also in this room. So I had the privilege of working with Dr. Vidya Srinivasan. She was my first person. She hired me as a faculty at MSW Vaishnav College, and my first professional boss, of course, was Mr. Tirunavukarasu. And it's really, if I can call, a little bit of a nervousness, because talking to your superiors is always not so easy, right? Okay, but then I will try to do as justice as possible. Okay, and what I'm doing today is, I was there for the previous session. I saw so many examples being given to you. Okay, the only difference that I bring is I have lived through at least one of them. Okay, and this was an organization called AstraZeneca. Okay, which is a pharma company, Anglo-Swedish pharma company, and I lived through that experience of leading a transformation journey in that institution, in that organization. Before I really go on, I wanted to set a few things. Okay, one is fundamentally I don't believe in sharing knowledge, because today you go to Google and you can get all kinds of information. Okay, and how do you synthesize that information with your experience actually becomes a knowledge. Okay, so talking about this gyan can sometimes be very misleading. Okay, and what was earlier true yesterday need not necessarily be true today. Okay, so you will have to look at things very differently. Okay, many years ago, somewhere in 2003 and 4, I was introduced to this concept of a book called Hard Facts, Dangerous Half-Truths and Total Nonsense. Okay, this is a book published by HBR. And today what you see, the whole lot of data sciences being there and evidence-based management all started with this. Interestingly, in this book, the management gurus of HBR, Harvard University, studied the oncologists, studied the doctors who treat cancer patients. And anybody with a familiar with that will know that oncology treatment is one of the most difficult and sometimes even dangerous thing. Like until unless you get the right dosage at the right place at the right time, it doesn't heal. Okay, and they studied that and they found that the way those doctors were using the data to how they interpret. I'm talking about 2003. I'm talking about almost 15 years ago when this study was happening. With today, of course, you have a whole lot of people talking about data analytics and all those things, but it started then. Okay, so one of the things which they very clearly said was, and they derived and studied various businesses with that kind of a background, and they say that what was past need not necessarily be true, because as the doctors would say, some of your drugs mature to the extent that they become ineffective. Ineffective in treatment, right treatment. So they had to constantly keep changing the process. Okay. One of the things which also says is that the business world is like war and love, okay, where everything is fair. Okay, and today we are seeing that. When it comes to competition, we are seeing it, how ruthless and how difficult or different or how radically challenging that environment can be. Okay, what was again true yesterday is necessarily not true today. So today what I'm going to do is that whatever I'm sharing, look at it from an information, look at it from an experience, but at the end of it, try to synthesize or customize it to how you can use it, how you can leverage on it. So this is a kind of a case study of, before that I just thought some bits of points from this book which talks about these hard facts. Okay, a lot of us don't like bad news, because bad news means action. Good news doesn't need actions. Okay, good news calls for celebration, but the bad news calls for action. Okay, second is we all get caught with casual benchmarking. Okay, casual benchmarking in terms of, oh, this happened a few days back, few years back, and also we get too much, rely on our gut feeling. Okay, if you really look at all those guts and these things, I mean, today this technological innovation that you see, the kind of revolution that you see would not have happened if gut was only thing that you would believe. You will have to look at how the gut aligns to the current requirement. Okay, and many a times we don't examine our own ideologies, because most of the ideologies are again from the past and which need not necessarily be true for the future. Okay, and this book breaks the myth called best practices. This book completely shatters your things of best practices, because the best practice that works for Microsoft, it need not necessarily work for the JK Group, because the evolution of Microsoft would be very different from the evolution of JK Group. So these days, last 3 years, I have been an entrepreneur, I have been doing my own consulting, and I meet all kinds of people in this business area. And today for me, like my KRA or my whatever you call it is a month on month. I survive month on month, because as an entrepreneur, you don't get a paycheck at the end of the month. Okay, you have to kind of be on the toes 24/7, and you have to be on the call. So what happens when you get into this, I mean, when I start reaching out to the CEOs, today there is always, you have to balance between the ethical and the unethical practices. Okay, while in a nice idea, I mean, ideal state, we would say, oh, we need to do business in this format and all that format. But today, if you see majority of the businesses, they get a right balance. Okay, and I think there's nothing wrong as long as you are able to pay the people on time and get the things done. So one of the things which I am driving a point here is that you have to be here and now, understanding the process and see how you can manage it. And of course, your values govern, your governance rule your, how you do it. But at the same time, you have to ensure that as on today, how you can develop the things to the future. And that's the entrepreneurial spirit, because you have to keep on discovering what is the value proposition that you would sell to your organization, to your superiors, to your business. Okay. Reason I shared this was, when I'm sharing about the case study of AstraZeneca here, don't take it as it is. Try to see how you can synthesize that information to your own requirement. Yep. So I lived through this journey in AstraZeneca. I had the privilege of joining when Astra Ideal became AstraZeneca. So Zeneca took over the Ideal shares. Ideal was an Hinduja group company, and those from Hyderabad who know, they have a very big setup in here. And when Zeneca took over, and Astra was a Swedish company, Zeneca was an UK based company, and they started looking at things very differently. Historically, this company was not doing well in India. Okay, and once the Zeneca took over, they had a Swedish managing director who came on board in the year of 2002. And 2002, he was revamping the entire HR function. Of course, he did for the other functions as well, but HR was also one of the functions which he was doing it, and I was one of the fortunate persons to join that group. I was with Dr. Reddy's before that, and DRL also had a very good track record between 96 to almost 2002, and that possibly earned me that job. Okay, and they were trying to see how they can bring in a phenomenal change. So one of the agenda, okay, before I go, I'll just share something quickly about the company, the business of this company. Okay, AstraZeneca was one of the top 10 global companies, and well known for, as they were innovators. Those who not aware of the pharma, in pharma they have two major segments. One is called the generic, one is called the innovators. A generic is like generally a contract manufacturing. You manufacture for various brands, or you can sometimes have your own brands. Whereas the innovators, they only stick to their brand. They don't get into generic. They are very specialty kind of a company, and they try to have their own, kind of a credibility and respect very differently. Okay, so they had 1,200 employees, of which 900 were in the sales and marketing. And our mandate was to change the sales and marketing. So the business case that we had was this company, which was around a few $100 million, and they were infusing $500 million as an investment. India was being seen in the year between 2001 and 2003. India was becoming a major global hub for the pharma industry. And AstraZeneca saw a great opportunity in doing that. They set up a huge R&D center in Bangalore. Anybody who's from Bangalore would see in Hebbal, in Kirloskar Business Park, they had set up a huge R&D center to do the research on the tuberculosis drug. And the Swedish MD wanted India to grow at the rate of 40% year on year, 40-45%. Prior to that, we were around 20% year on year. Okay. And this gentleman came from an R&D background, so highly process-centered person. Okay, so if I entered his room with an idea, I had to go with the complete project map. I have to do complete what will be my inputs, what will be my activities, what will be the outputs, and what are the crises we will face, or what can go wrong, what can go right. I mean, in his room, even if you go with the one candidate selection also, it will take at least an hour and a half to convince him that this candidate is really good, or why he is not good, or whatever it is. Okay. So he had an ability to ask very deep questioning. His name was Lars Wallen. Very deep questioning, and he would pull like the, in the casually we used to say, this guy is somebody who would dissect the hair also, like he was of that kind of a person. Okay. And our mandate there was to see how we can create a performance-driven culture in the sales and marketing. Okay. This sales and marketing force is a unionized force. In pharma, sales and marketing is unionized. There is a countrywide union, and you had to work with the union. And at the same time, the company wanted to clean up the system. Okay. So what we did was we were told to focus on productivity, retention, and also ensure that we grow. And we also wanted to become the employer of choice. Okay. Process-centered man. So he would always love to process. Okay. And sometimes, as a consultant, I also enjoy these graphics, because the moment you give facts, you can be questioned. Okay. So you don't have much to twist around facts, but when you give a figure like this, then you have the flexibility to play around. Okay. So what we did was we looked at the organization and says, okay, where do we start first? Okay. And first, of course, was the organization's strategic plan. Basically, the strategic plan was well derived. And gentlemen, don't have to take the photos of these slides. I will give back the slides to you. Okay. The only reason I'm using my laptop is sometimes there is a generation issue between a Mac and the other one. So that's why I said to safely finish the session, and then the slides all yours. Okay. So we did, of course, the strategic plan of the organization was very well drawn. Okay. And then we said, okay, so how will be the structure work? Okay. The gentleman before that, he was talking about the structure, strategy, culture, everything. So we got all of them here. And then we said, okay, the first thing we said, how do you get the role efficacy portion right? Okay. Now, typically what happens is, typically your dialogues in your organization is, oh, I am doing 1 level down, 2 level down, 3 level down. Okay. And sometimes this becomes a kind of a disconnect with the whole process. Okay. So you have to understand the role efficacy very, very deeply. And I'm coming to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about how you define the role efficacy. How did we define the role efficacy? And then after that, we said, given the role, the job description would happen. Okay. Now, all of us watch movies, and all of us see this, a lot of these movies. And if you see the actor, the actor, actresses, everybody have a very clear role defined, and from that role defined comes the dialogue. Okay. So same thing was happening with us as well. So we said, okay, if this is your role, then your job description will, integrate all those aspects there. Okay. And then we said we will do the goal setting of these people. Goal setting, again, it was a very aligned to the job description, the goal setting. And then we said we will have a performance. McKinsey was working with us on this area. Okay. McKinsey, they had almost a 5-day conference in the UK that time, where we were told how the evaluation process would happen. In fact, the evaluation, the process evaluation, and this performance management itself goes to something around 96 slides. Over the 5 days, we were grilled on that. And typical McKinsey style, we were every day evening there would be a test saying that, okay, how much have you learnt? If you haven't learnt it, you had to learn it that evening, because the next day again you had to virtually pass the test to attend the next day. Otherwise, there was a table with a red top, okay, and all those who were sitting in the red tops were possibly people who didn't qualify the previous day. Okay, and then there was something, the green top. Green top is those people who excelled. Okay, so it was a kind of a recognition, and it was happening in that room anyway. So we had to really grill through this whole process, and then also the focus was, having done this, we had to, the goal was to create a culture of collaboration and empowering. Not just alone, because your performance doesn't happen in isolation. It happens how your next person, okay, the person from whom you have taken the input and the person to whom you are giving the output are all aligned. Otherwise, it just goes haywire. Okay, that's one of the problems which we face in many times. And even during my term with an organization called Chevron, I was managing Vietnam, and in the Vietnam we had this problem where mercenary attitude of these employees was so rampant. Okay, Cambodia, Vietnam. It was so difficult to even to bring those three fellows into the room and saying, ki, oh, you are taking the work from him, you have to deliver something to him. The agreement was not so easy. Okay. And lastly, we also defined very clearly that the leadership has to be engaged. Okay. Your performance-driven culture doesn't happen if the leadership remains in the 11th floor or the corner room. Typically, just to tell you something about Lars Wallen was a Swedish national around 55 years age at that time, and he came to India and he saw all the sales reps going in bikes, okay, because that's how we go. Okay. So he says, one of my identity will be, I will also start taking a bike. Imagine the managing director of a billion-dollar company. He had himself a bullet motorcycle in Bangalore, and he would drive. And if you go to the AstraZeneca, you would see a bullet parked in the portico. Okay, so this was the thing. So one of the things which he did was, he would go for the sales calls with these people sitting behind the back. In fact, he would even holiday with these sales folks in the bike itself. Okay. One of the lessons that I learned was an absolute level of humility and connect with the ground level. Okay, and in politics we see this very happening, because that's the way you empower or influence the people. So we did this, and then we went to the next step. We said, okay, now how do you get your performance plan in place? Okay, so first we said that there was an, if you can't read it, I can, when you share it, you can see it. First we said this, there will be an organization strategic plan, and based on that, every department was expected to develop their own strategic plan. Like for example, if I had the fear of attrition in the sales force because of whatever we are doing, we had to focus on how do we ring fence them, how do we contain that whole process. Okay, even if it means looking at the compensation benefit or engagement or whatever it is. Okay, and then we said that the objective that each individual will have will be aligned to the both the departmental's role and his own position. Okay, and then just the below table talks about what are those positional requirements. Like for example, if I am in the part of a top management, my focus should be on strategic direction, policy level roles. Execution cannot be my responsibility. Okay, because if I get into the execution, then it's very, very high chances that I will miss on the strategic focus. Then came the senior management, and these were all the general managers or the people who were managing the functional head. They were told that you will have to focus on product portfolio strategy. If you have a product, how are you going to launch it? Again, see, execution is not coming there. But if you look at the middle management level, is where there is a largely execution focused teams in. Okay, so what does it mean to us here? Okay, so if I see if the top management is getting into execution, that means your middle management is possibly dysfunctional. Okay, which means you will have to clean up the middle management, you will have to look at how you change the whole process. Similarly, if senior management is not able to give your strategic focus in a room like this, if you can't bring in a diverse thought process, challenge, support the issues and bring in the analytical bent of mind, then you are not there. So it was a very clear this when we were looking at the assessment center, these were also becoming the criteria for us to define the next steps, the competencies and the kind of evaluation process that we'll go into. And in case you have a question, you can stop me wherever you want, because this is not something which I have to go through the sequencing here. I have lived through this, so it's there in my blood, so I can always catch up wherever I miss. Okay. After this is the typical 3x3 matrix. Okay, we developed a talent development process. Culture cannot change until unless you start focusing on the talent, focusing on the last one in your organization. Okay, so that's where the culture begins. So we said, okay, we will develop a complete talent development process, which meant we had to develop an assessment development center, and then we will align them to talent grid. So one of the things which we did very consciously at that time was we said we will not buy any assessment center. We would not go to the market, look at a consultant buying it. There were 2-3 things fundamentally AstraZeneca was believing. One was to create a base in India to have a strong internal assessors who can later be replicated in the rest of the world. And even in 2003, there was a realization that there is a lot of potential in India, there's a lot of skill sets in India, and at a much lower cost as compared to other places. One of the fallout of this was that we did this assessment center in Sweden, Spain, and later on in the US as well. Okay, so this was replicated in those places. Okay, so I had a girl, Vartika Meher, who's now with L'Oreal in the Europe, who was leading this project along with me. And of course, we went to SHL to help us train the people in designing the assessment center and also to become the internal assessors. So we picked up around 32 people who would be trained in this area and who would later become our internal consultants. Okay. And this 32 were not from HR, just around 4 of them were from HR, the rest 28 were from the business functions. And so that when it comes to implementing an assessment center and telling somebody is high potential or not a high potential, the credibility was high because the discussion that will happen in the room would be a hardcore business facts. It's not like, see, one of the challenges that I see as a consultant, even today I see, is that sometimes we don't understand the finer aspects of the organization. Okay, because we get so so carried away by our own knowledge and past experiences that we miss out or we are not sensitive to how the thing really works. Okay, for those of you, if you are interested, there was a movie called Back to School many years ago, where very interestingly, where the academia and the managerial conflict was very well projected. And I think a lot of learning was from that, because where you have to sometimes, whatever knowledge you have to align it to the requirement of that organization then and there. So we did this, and basically we moved forward. These are some details that I'm sharing again just to give thing. And what we did was whoever we identified as stars and apple, we had a kind of a process built for them. Okay, so one of the things which we did very differently is that we said when it comes to stars, training doesn't help. Okay, because these are people high potential, they are self-learners, they would do a lot of things themselves, and some would show off, some would not show off, very silently manage things themselves. So once you have identified them, how do you create a visibility for them? So one of the things which my learning was that most of the stars will crave for recognition, crave for some kind of an identity in the largest spectrum. Okay, so sending them to an IIM Ahmedabad wouldn't help, because this guy would possibly will find it bored there. So what we did, and these are all high action kind of a person with a good knowledge base. So we said, okay, these fellows will work very closely with the leadership. In fact, we even got some of these people are connected to the global level. Okay, so one of them is the person who was a star at that time in AstraZeneca. He is the CEO of the Australian market today, Krishna Rao. So this guy was a star there. We put them to manage various small projects, first in India, and then we later took him to Southeast Asia. And in 2011, he was identified as a CEO material. Okay. Now imagine a manager, a guy who joined as a manager in 2004. Okay. By 2011, he is leading a close to a few $1 million business in Australia. Australia is again a very difficult market for pharma industry. Okay. So again, for the apples, what we said was Apple would get basically recognized from a reward recognition point of view, and these were people who were very close to the stars. They were either high on potential, high on performance, but at the same time balanced on the other aspect as well. So we said that these are the fellows who will be coached, mentored, and groomed to be the stars in the few years down the line. Also, one thing which I must tell you here is AstraZeneca had a concept called up or out. We had a policy called up or out. McKinsey's talk about it, which they gave us to us. So what happens is in the 3-year period, 3-year horizon, if you don't go up, you may have to go out. Okay, and what does it mean? The moment you have hit the glass ceiling, your compensation would freeze. If you are not able to add value further to your role, your compensation, your designation would get freeze. You may get the inflationary hike of say 3.5–4%, whatever was there, but you will not get anything more than that. So you had to display something different. So which actually was also fueling this, when we did this thing, which was also fueling an urge within anybody down the line that I have to groom somebody below me, because that was one of the criteria. Because if I have to go up, I have to have somebody to fill this place. And at the same time, I should also learn and stretch myself to be ready for the next role. 3-year was the horizon, and after 3 years, they would seal it. Okay, they would just say, okay, fine, you're good, just be here, okay, and till the next opportunity comes up. Okay, otherwise, growth was again sealed. One of the things which these companies did was they always kept their compensation cost same, or rather at a certain ratio. Okay. For the comp to go up, you had to have a lot of justifications. Okay. So given that scenario, this used to really support us. Only the fellow who can bring an extra business or extra advantage to the organization would get promoted and would get whatever that promotionary hikes were there. Okay. And similarly, we did for the others as well. Basically, we had people who were performers. Now these performers are your Sachin Tendulkars. Okay, good batsmen but poor captains. Okay, so what we did was, you still need them. You still need these guys because they are the fellows who will deliver the sales target. Okay, they would have hit the glass ceiling in any case, but at the same time, what we were doing them is that we would treat them with all the respects, with all the recognitions, call them for this conference, give him a certificate, or offer a holiday to his family or something of that kind. But these guys were not going to be the leaders. They will not be the fellows who will move there. Okay, and the supervisors were expected to manage their expectations. Okay, and then there was something called a weak link. Weak links are those people with high potential but low performance. Typically, what I see in many organizations is very quickly we target the candidate. Okay, whoever comes in that, just give me a sec. Yeah. Whoever comes in that weak link, we target the candidate. But here I saw a very different approach. We targeted first the organization, the function itself. We asked, have we put the person in the wrong job first? Or has the supervisor missed on analyzing where this person should actually be going? Or is it that he has been victimized and put into an area where his capabilities don't match? Even before we put somebody in that box, the management would discuss this along with the supervisors. Whoever was to go into the box, the supervisors first had to face the consequences before we would label that person. And if at the end we find that yes, the individual was at fault or individual is not able to deliver, then possibly we would put him on PIP and evict him. But at the same time, there was a time horizon given, 12 months. It was not like, again, when it comes to ethical standard, this organization believed that we had to be fair and transparent to the employees and stretch as much as we can so that they live through the process. Okay. So what is that one lesson that we learned here is that sometimes as supervisors, let us not take the path of least resistance. Path of least resistance, oh, here I have a non-performer, can I just crucify him now? Okay. Can we do a due diligence and see where is the non-performance really wrong? Again, this organization was process centered. It was not just like an event based or a contingency based organization where it would take a decision right then and there. Okay. Also what happened was that this organization would question the recruitment process sometimes, like you have these question marks who are low on potential, low on performance. There the recruitment process, the persons who went into selection were questioned. If this person was there in the system for 3 or 4 or 5 years, then supervisor had a lot to talk before we go to the employee. Okay. So ideally what we were doing is that we were also creating a process on a long term basis, saying that I cannot take some kind of a spontaneous decision to just go and do something. A lot of time in the recruitment that happens, that we finally find a candidate and we are so excited to just close the job, close the role. There it was not. It was something like we had to go, because subsequently if this happens, then I as a supervisor would be questioned. Okay, and then we also got basically a career progression process for them. Typically what would take around somebody 10-15 years, these guys would take much lower. All your stars were put on a fast track growth. In fact, even before we got the assessment development center in place, we had identified close to 100 projects within the Asia Pacific where these people could be later placed. We had not still come to the stage where we have identified stars, but we were looking at that, can those things be in place before we get into this act. And also for those who were performers, we ensured that they also are groomed enough to proceed further. So these were some of the quick fixes kind of templates that we were following. For every positions we had ready now, ready in next 2 years, and ready in 2 to 5 years. We had identified, because their development plans were aligned to this. Okay, for the others, the succession plan for every position was also mapped there. Okay. So what happened is, when this development were put in place, the training function become much more easier for us. Like today, I know some of you would be struggling to get nominations for the training program. You organize a training program and you really struggle to get people commit to the whole program. Here what we did it differently is that we made training as the responsibility of the individual, and said if you go through all this development process, then you have a chance to get evaluated differently. And again, for every position we had completely mapped. One of the things which we did differently is that a lot of these informations were shared to a certain level. It did not possibly go all the level, but certain level, so that there was enough of bandwidth in terms of transparency and values built. Yes, there is a hope for some of us. Yeah, so this was again a career path defined for everyone. Okay, in fact, each individual went through a process of getting sitting with the supervisor and one of the HR representatives, where his career path was fully mapped for a few years, 4 or 5 years from then onwards, so that he sees himself growing in the organization. Now, these are not your superficial conference room discussion that happened and then it just settles there. It was got into the actions, it got into the various functional level, and sometimes even to the level of the individual itself. He knew what was in store for him. So what did we achieve by the 2 years that we did? Okay, and this is where it talks about success of this whole story. Okay, helped us ring fence the talent. Attrition brought down to almost 5% in the high potential and high performers. Okay, a lot of these people saw a future for themselves. Okay, succession planning was in place. Okay, was in place for almost all the positions that we had in the country. Okay, we had got those templates right, so that we were not scared about who is quitting, who is going to stay, and all those. Those other discussions, this guy who's thinking that, that guy is thinking that. Did not happen. Okay. Employees valued their individual development plans because it meant that they would, they have to do it to grow. Okay. And career plan, career path, job rotation was happening. Okay. Like for example, we said anybody to take a national role will have to serve at least 3 regions in this country, and East was an important region there. This West Bengal, because that was one of the most difficult places. I think one of the things which I have mentioned here is also when it came to failures, we saw cultural challenges within the country. Anybody from Bombay would not like to go and work in West Bengal. Okay, because Bombay was an easier place to do business, West Bengal was not. Okay. And also the sales figure, used to be around 20, grew up to 28% in these 2 years. Okay. Despite all the challenges of that year, because 2004 and 5 was also very challenging year for pharma industry, because a lot of these patented drugs were falling off the patent in the 2004, so which was becoming a challenge from a generic competition. Despite that, they grew up. Okay. Like I said, what we do differently, we were transparent, we were objective, we were fair. I think that's something which I find many companies struggle with. Okay, because our agendas are sometimes so strong that we don't go up in the air and just talk about it. And yes, like I said, mercenary attitude of my employees, anybody who was identified as a high potential, he started bossing around. Okay, and sometimes you had to really bring them to a sense. Okay, and also competition was eyeing some of our candidates. Despite that, I think the organization still did well, and is still doing well. Even today, AstraZeneca is still one of the good companies in the world to work for. Okay. And one of the biggest challenges we found was build versus buy. Building is not easy. Okay. What we thought the entire assessment development center would happen over 7-8 months, it did not. It led to a longer duration, because we had to test every exercise, everything, just to ensure that it is generating the right data. And also there was a job evaluation process kicked in thereafter, where we said that a lot of time what happens is, many of us, when we join a work, we start doing a certain job. If you are a high performer, a lot of work gets added to your role. Okay, very silently, very softly it comes into it, and the company sometimes doesn't realize it, the management doesn't realize it. You become a very critical resource for the organization, and then the competitor picks you up. So what we did was, we went into job evaluation, we upgraded some of the positions. If something was just a manager, we possibly made it senior manager. We followed a very scientifically developed job evaluation process. There was a very thorough Excel sheet drawn, where the moment you provide a numerical value for every job description item, it would show up what this job is now become. Okay, there was also job shrinking that happened. In many cases, there was a downgrading as well. Okay, so this is about the AstraZeneca case study, and ladies and gentlemen, and this is where I stop. I thought it will take me around 45-50 minutes. It's just yes, we did. Okay, one thing that you need to understand, the Swedish culture or the Scandinavian culture is a very open culture. Okay, and while in Sweden I used to see people would tell that, I met this guy in that company. Oh, he is talking about all these things to me. Okay, so even if somebody goes to interview and comes back, he would talk about it in the company. Like, we don't do it. We find it culturally, we are a little hesitant to do that, but that country. So that same process this MD wanted in India to happen. He said, let's be transparent. And on the lighter side, he said, even if you have to hang somebody, tell him you want to hang him, and then hang him. So don't hang him, in the dark.
So sometimes surprises may come if they deny to their DSC rating.
Pardon?
This is not my DSC rating, but the means they are not accepting their rating. No. This is not mine.
So this typically happens when a third party does it. But if I have, like for example, if you say a finance fellow, I have one member of finance in my assessment development center as an internal assessor, and he calls another finance fellow and says, oh, this is what it is. Okay, because he was also in the room when 4 or 5 assessors were discussing this individual's rating. Okay, and that time it becomes little more difficult for this Johnny to question that whole thing. So what we did was we got the like for example, in army they say, now if you can't beat them, join them types. Okay, so we got those enemies on our side itself, so that it became easier for us to fight the battle.
So at the end, you have developed 32 IDPs.
No, 32 internal assessors. Assessors. Yep.
You mentioned in your presentation that the initial target was to increase sales from 20% to over 40,000. You achieved only 38%.
Yeah, that is within the 2 years. Subsequently, in 2007, they had hit the target. Yeah, it was a 5-year period. Thank you very much.